Got it. Okay. So welcome, happy Friday. Today I want to just show you a little bit about how to fit a linear model, for example, but also look at time series, a little bit of time series analyses. And so just making sure, okay, we're recording, I've got the transcript on. So I'm on our Moodle page here, and assignments for chapter 7 and chapter 8 will use the code that or something similar to what we're doing today, right? And so chapter 7 is a lot easier than chapter 8, but you've got this. Okay. I bumped the due dates, although I am keeping track of who's submitting on the original timelines, but I know things get kind of hectic this time of year. And so I changed the due dates, I guess, for chapter 5 and 6 and the second presentation to Sunday instead of today. Okay, so if you're freaking out about that, then you've got till Sunday to freak out about that. You might see I've put a little note saying early if it's early, and that's just for me. So I don't worry about that. Yeah. So hopefully that comes in handy and you guys have a little bit more time to work on those, and that should be good. Okay. So I also posted the assignment for chapter 7 and 8, obviously. So you can work on those. What's nice is there's only one more assignment after this. Okay. And I am not sure if I want to do another presentation. We've done 2, and I think, that's pretty good. We might do a third one. I can't decide. Okay, but I'll decide over the weekend. What's better for your grades? So let's see here. Let's get to it. I kind of posted it. It's in kind of wedged in the middle here. There's the linear regression and time series, and that's just the R code that we're going to work through. So you could open that and open an RStudio if you want. The monthly sales is the data set that we're going to use. This is a CSV file, so you could just download it and bring it in right away. I think that's the easiest way to import data if it started out as an Excel file. Okay, so these 2 files, the linear regression and time series and the monthly sales, those are the ones that I'm working through today. All right, so I found a package called Fast Dummies. So I don't typically create dummy variables, and I'll show you why we don't really need to create dummy variables, but it's what's happening in the background. So sometimes it's a little bit easier to wrap our heads around what's going on if we can see the dummy variables, right? And so that was kind of a fun find. So because you probably, I want to be big and big, zoomed in big. Let's see here. Sure, one more zoom in. How about that? That should do, yeah. Smooch that over there. Okay, so you might have to run the install.packages fast dummies just once though, right? You only have to install packages once, and then you have to call the library. Okay, so I'm going to be using the fast dummies library and the ggplot2 library. Okay. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the working directory to my desktop, because that's where my files are. And so I keep my working directory as my desktop, and then I move things later. So I would have to change this later, right? If you're finding, and obviously if you use this code, that's not going to work. You don't have a user /Emily Gustafson /desktop. Only I have that. Right, so you have to set your own working directory, okay? And let's see here. Then I'm going to bring in the monthly sales.csv file. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just run these libraries because I just opened a new session. Okay, and so I'm going to command enter, or control, whatever you're working on. And it ran without any issues, so we're good to go. Okay. Sometimes if you ran library fast dummies and it said, hey, I don't know what a library fast dummies is, then you would have to install the fast dummies package. Okay. Set the working directory. Why not? Okay. And then I'm going to bring in the sales data. So the monthly sales.csv, I think the default is header equals true, but I just like to have it there just to emphasize that there are headers and there's only 2 columns in that data set. You could open it up in Excel and have a look, right? That's easy enough. There's no package called fast dummies. There is, I just installed it. You'd have to run this. Install.packages fast dummies. So you'd have to remove that hashtag and then run it. I'll run it here. Oh, updating. I just loaded it. So did it look like this? Did your error look like this? Oops. Uh-oh. Restarting our session. Or did your error look like something else? Okay. So it looks like it forced it. So it said error in the install.packages, and then it's updating it, and then you had to restart the R session, but it just does that automatically. I like to say automagically, but then I catch myself because it's not proper, but it is funny. So, but just so you're not running that install every time, because it takes a lot of time, right? You have to comment it out just so it's there if you need to look, if you need to run it. So then were you able to get something that looks like this? I'll wait for that. Maybe just let it work through it a little bit. But I think we're okay. So I've already set the working directory. So now I'm going to load this monthly sales data and I'm going to save it in something called sales. Okay. So we can drop down and the sales data, and I can view it here. All right. You've got the month and then you've got the sales, and I think it's in thousands or something. Probably not hundreds of dollars. $105 in month 1. Probably more like 105,000. Can't remember. So then we've got months 1 through 12. Okay. And then the corresponding sales. So the response variable here is going to be the sales. Okay. So what I want to do, and so everything that we do, there are so many different ways to do it. And I pick one way. It's either because it's what I'm used to, or because I think it's the most explicit. Okay. And so, but what I mean by explicit is when you read the code, you don't have to trace back and see what each thing is. Okay. And so, so sometimes I'll opt for that in favor of kind of readability. Okay, usually it's not the fanciest way, right? The fanciest way is to just have something that kind of dynamically changes. But for showing you guys how to do stuff, I think saying something like sales $ month is more explicit, right? Because it says, go to the sales data set and give me the month column. Oh yeah, give me that error. Okay. I'll wait for that error. Oh, install packages. Oh yeah, so it's not fast dummies. It's lowercase f fast, capital D dummies. It's very, very picky. So try that and see if it works. Yeah. Nice. We can get away without it, so don't worry too much about it. But okay, so one thing that we might want to do is we might want to, well, first, if we have the month and we have the sales, right, then we might want to look at the sales as the response variable over the months, right? We'd want to make sure that they map chronologically, and with the month denoted as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it will be, right? If it was January, February, March, April, you would have to rearrange them and force that order, but I'm pretty sure that's what we did. I'm showing you some code how to change the order or how to force the order in another R session. So I think it's like the order command or something. So I've got the time series plot here, but I'm actually going to pull that. I'm going to move that up here, and I'll post the updated code after class. Okay. Oh, awesome. Yeah, it's very, very picky with spelling, but I'm glad it's working. So if I want to look at a time series plot is really just the response variable with the time variable on the x-axis. Okay, and so if I do a very basic plot, now just the plot command takes a y variable and then a tilde, right? So a little tilde, and it's right below. So on my keyboard, it's right below my escape. I don't know if you can see that. No. Okay, so you'll have to find the tilde, but the plot command looks like y tilde x. Okay, so on the y-axis, I want to have, and here, this is where I'm being explicit. You could say data equals sales and then just use the names. There are many, 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 many ways to do it. This is not by any means necessarily even the most efficient way. It's definitely not the most efficient, but it's the most explicit. So that's what I tend to do. So go to the sales data set and pull out the sales column. Oh, okay, this is the exact same problem, right? You have to use, it's fast dummies with a capital D. And that should work, because otherwise it looks good. Yeah. Okay, so on the y-axis, I want the sales, and on the x-axis, I want the month. So if I plot this, it should show up down here. And I'm going to try the zoom function. Oh, maybe not. Okay. So zoomed in, right? I've got each of the months 1 through 12 on the x-axis, and I've got the sales on the y-axis. So this is our first glance at what our time series looks like, right? And so I've got this, well, you could be convinced that it would be a horizontal pattern, right? But we know that, okay, these are months and maybe the sales across the months are going to be different, right? Maybe there's some seasonality here that we want to capture. And sure, so what it looks like is it looks like it's going, you have to make the noises, right? So there is this kind of this pattern, right? The seasonal pattern. And because it happens across 1 month, 1 year, then it would be seasonality, right? It's not necessarily, what's the other one? Lost the term. That's okay. The other one, another one. Oh, nice, you got it working, great. Okay, so how do I get out of here? Okay, plot zoom. Where's my RStudio? Okay, so I'm gonna close that. Back to my RStudio. Okay, I'm back. So here it's so on our screen here, it's all smushed. So it wasn't until we blew it up that we could clearly see this pattern, right? And so we want to try to capture that pattern. Okay. It's not cyclical. Cyclical, that was the word I'm looking for. When it spans over a year, right, or past a year, to return back in the cycle, then it's cyclical. Whereas here, this is seasonal, seemingly, right? As it kind of cycles through or seasons through the year. Think of it that way. So first thing, we graph the data, right? What does it look like? Is there a horizontal trend? Is there seasonality? Is there an upward trend, right, that we need to capture? In this case, no. It looks like it's just going to be kind of up and down, but on the horizontal, right? And so you want to look at your graph and compare it to those patterns that we saw, but also kind of tap into what you know about the data, right? Especially if you expect the sales, for example, to vary depending on the season, right? Spring, summer, fall, whatever, winter. Then you'd want to incorporate that into your model. Now, here's where I got a little bit crazy, but it's also, I think, the easiest thing to do in this case. There are lots of other ways, but I just didn't want to be writing the same code for every quarter. So what I'm going to do is one, to show you how to make new variables, right? How to make new categorical variables, but also we're going to use those to make dummy variables. Okay, so we've seen this activity, right? And then we say, okay, well, what if I break it into quarters, right? 3 months in a quarter, right? There are 4 quarters in a year, and so January to March, first quarter, April, May, June, second quarter, so on and so forth. Don't make me go on. And so what I've done is I want to map from each month. So now I'm over here in the data. If the month is 1, 2, or 3, I want a quarter variable to say Q1, Q1, Q1. Okay. Q1, Q1, Q1. And then I want it to say Q2, Q2, Q2. And then I want it to say Q3, Q3, Q3. We want to match it to the month though, right? We can't just assume that the month is in order unless you sort it, right? So unless you force it, like I said, there are so many ways that you can do this, right? And it's really a creative process. And what you're going to find is that as you do more, you're going to develop your preferences. And so here, what I've decided is I wanted to show you guys the if-else statement or the if-else function. Okay, and so the if-else function takes the following inputs. Okay, so the condition, we start with the condition. Okay. And then if true, then give me, Q1. And then if false, do this. Okay. And so, and I use this in Excel a lot too. So if you've worked in Excel, then you have probably used an if statement. I don't know. I do it. It's the only time that I will agree to use Excel is if I can use if statements throughout. Makes it really slow though, so I'd prefer to use R. But so what I want to do is I want to make a new column in sales. So in the sales data set, I want to create a column called quarter. Fine. And so what I'm doing is I'm assigning it to, and it's going to be conditional on the month. Okay. And so what I'm saying, if the sales month, so if the entry in the month column is less than or equal to 3, okay, so that's the condition. So if the sales month is less than or equal to 3, then write Q1. Because it's text, I have to write it in quotes. Okay. And then here's where I got a little hokey. Instead of writing separate commands for each of these, I said, okay, well, if the month was not less than or equal to 3, then see if the month was less than or equal to 6. You want to be really careful with your brackets, right? And so I always make use of R finishing my end brackets, right? Because otherwise I'd be hooped, right? Counting brackets all day, right? And so what I did was, if the sales month is less than or equal to 3, then write Q1. If not, well, is it less than or equal to 6? If it is, write Q2. If neither of those are true, right? That's how I get to this next statement. Then see if the month is less than or equal to 9. If it is, write Q3. And because of my knowledge about the data, I don't need to be explicit, because then I can say, okay, then if it's not Q1 or Q2 or Q3, then it has to be in Q4, because I know I only have 12 months here, right? And so so that's what we're gonna do. Okay. So when I run this code, okay, and you might have to look up logical statements, so conditions such as less than or equal to, right? Some common conditions. A vertical line is or. You can use and for and. Oops. You can use exclamation equal to for not equal to. Right, so you'd have to look up conditional statements in R. Here, conditional statements, just to give you a clue of what to Google. Okay, so if you're looking for something specific, then those are some key ones. But if you want to get a little bit fancier, then you'd have to Google it. That's fine. Okay. I actually tried the or, but I must have been doing it wrong. And then I thought, oh, you know what? If I do the less than or equal to 3, then I can keep going inside the statement. So it worked out. Okay. You don't have to give up just because you can't find a solution right away. In fact, what's the point of that? I rarely find the solution right away, and sometimes I'll have to leave it and come back to it, right? And so you just need to keep at it, okay? So when I run this, what I'm expecting is for it to write Q1 and for the first three, Q2 for the next three, Q3, Q4, and the column should be called quarter with a capital Q. So if I run this, ta-da, and then I can look at the data here, see how we've got this quarter. So for small data sets like this, it's possible to just go in and have a look and make sure that it performed the way that you wanted it to, right? There's no shame in that, right? And so for larger data, it's harder. So then you'd want to figure out, okay, what are some graphics or what are some summaries that I could create to help me identify if something went wrong, right? So that's harder. But for small data sets like this, you can just go through and you can make sure that it happened. So now I want to use the fast dummy creator, I guess. So the dummy calls is from the fast dummies library. Okay. And so what it does is it takes the input of the data set and then it identifies any categorical variable and turns it into a dummy variable. Okay. And so here it's going to recognize that the quarter here, because these are text, those are the ones being turned into dummy variables. There are no, so the month is stored as an integer, so that's a number. And so it's not going to treat that as a category. It wouldn't make sense anyways, because we only have one month, data for 1 month each. So if I run this, then, oh, hey, did I not? I thought I did. Maybe I didn't. Make sure I bring in my libraries here. Hope it works. Okay, good. So now you can imagine how much work that would be, right? You could have done this with the if-else statement, right? So here, this is equivalent to sales $sign Q1 if else sales $sign month is less than or equal to 3, then write Q1 else, or sorry, then return 1 else return 0, because it has to be a binary variable, right? And so then you could do that for the other quarters, except you'd have to change your condition, right? I've tacked on this other variable here, which should look like quarter Q1. It's just a lot easier. And now you have these quarter Q1, Q2, Q3 all in one column that you can use as a factor, right? So remember, we use the faceting, for example. We'll be able to use that again, but it assumes that they're all in the same column. So creating this quarter and then using the dummy command or the dummy calls is a little bit easier and a little bit more flexible later on. Etc. Okay. I'll make a note here. We prefer creating one column with the quarter, with the quarters, so we can use it for faceting, for example. Okay. So we prefer creating one column with the quarters, then applying the dummy calls to create dummy variables. Like I said, I'll post this. I just want you to have a quick note there about what I did or said. Okay, so what we could do is we could have this data, we have the sales and we have the months. And so this would be a regular, simple linear regression. Okay, it's just because we know about time series that we want to try to capture that seasonality. But let's pretend that we don't know that. So that's chapter 7, right? Where we don't have any clue about that. And we're probably looking at other variables that are not time, right? And so then what we would do is you would build a linear model. So the linear model uses the LM command for linear model. And it has the same format, LM y tilde x. And so there's lots of ways that you can make the plot command, but I like to have the y tilde x because it follows the same format as the linear model command. Okay. And so here, what I'm going to do is I could just run this linear model, but it actually doesn't do anything. Okay, I think if I run it, so here I've just run the linear model, then I get this tiny bit of information. I get the intercept and I get the slope. Okay, so that's good, that's nice, but we want a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save it as mod. Okay, whenever I'm working with different models, I have these very generic mod 2, mod 3, mod 4, and it gets really confusing and really annoying when I go back and look at it. But unless I have very clear names, I'll call them mod for model. So if I assign this linear model command to something called mod, okay, then when I run it, notice how it doesn't generate anything in the console here, but it does save a bunch of information here. So now what I can do is I can use the summary command, which we've used on a data set, but we can also use it on other things. So usually on a model. So if we use the summary on the model, then we get all this output. Okay, we get summary statistics for the residuals. We're going to ignore that. Okay, we get the point estimates. Sorry, I only wanted to highlight the coefficients there. So those are the estimates and those are the coefficients. So here we've got our y-intercept and here we've got our slope. We have the standard error for each of those. We have a t, we have the p-value, right, to help us determine if it's contributing significantly to the model. Here, everything's hinging on the intercept. So month isn't a very good predictor as is, okay? We're going to be comparing the multiple r squared. Okay, remember a high r squared is good, right? It means we have a good model. Okay, we can also have the F statistic, but we'll ignore that for now. And yeah, so we're hoping we can find a model that has a better r squared value than 0.06, right? That's only 6% of the variability in y is captured by this line on x, so that's not very good. right? So what we can do is, what if I want to plot this line on my graph? So the key thing is that the graph has to be present. And then what I can do is I can use this ab line command, or AB line, but I call it ab line. I'm funny like that. And so if you use the ab line and then on the mod, then what it'll do is it'll extract the slope and the intercept, and it'll draw the line. So what I like to do is just to make sure that I'm drawing it on the right plot, I like to have the same plot. So you run it, it's already there. Sorry, I'm pointing on my screen, doesn't help. So I run it just to make sure that it's what's showing up here. And then when I draw the ab line, it draws the line on here. I'll show you a fancier ggplot, but I find that the base plots are really just really nice for getting quick information. And then if you're presenting something to a client, then yeah, you should probably make it a little bit fancier, right? Maybe use ggplot or something like that. No, ggplot's your only option, but for quick information gathering, right here, it's obvious that this is not the model that we want to submit to the client. So now we move on, right? We find the model that we want, and then we perfect that graph, because there's no sense in spending time on a graph that we're not even going to use. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I can incorporate the dummy variables if I want to, so I can enter a series of dummy variables into the model. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to exclude the month because it's basically wrapped up in the quarters, right? And so I'm developing mod 2, and it's still a linear model, and the Y value is still the sales, okay? But my X values are going to be Q1, Q2, and Q3. I've excluded Q4 because it would be redundant. And so Q4 is absorbed into the intercept, right? So we've talked about that in class, and here it is in action. So now I've got mod 2, and I can run a summary of mod 2. Already, just off the top, we see that the R squared has jumped to 41.6%. That's not huge, but it's pretty good, right? So if we look at this, right, I have a coefficient for the intercept, and then I have a coefficient for Q1, Q2, and Q3. Now, how we interpret these are slightly different than before, right? Because these are no longer slopes. These are going to be, if it's Q1, then the predicted sales is 23.33 more than when it was Q4. So the intercept is Q4 because it was excluded from the model, right? And so interpreting these coefficients is slightly different. Okay. If you wanted to, right here, this assumes that you've already built these dummy variables. What if you don't have those, and what if you don't want to? You don't have to. Oh, what? I know. So R is clever in the way that it recognizes that quarter is a category. So it is a categorical variable, and it does have multiple observations of the same category. And so what it does is, if I tell it to do, so here is mod 3 that I'm going to compare the previous model to. I'm going to do a linear model of sales against the quarter. Okay. And if I look at the summary of that, we see the exact same R squared value. However, what's different? If we compare the coefficients here, right, these are going to be different. Why is that? Well, this model uses Q1 as the intercept, right? And then Q2 is an adjustment from Q1, and then Q3 is an adjustment from Q1, and then Q4 is an adjustment from Q1, right? Whereas before, Q1 was an adjustment from Q4, right? And so it just depends on what one is being used as the intercept, right? These models have the same R squared, okay? But mod 2 uses Q4 as the intercept, and mod 3 uses Q1 as the intercept. Sorry, it's being kind of slow here. And I have no idea where I'm at for time. I just checked. So good. A little bit of time. So if I wanted to do a fancy ggplot, which you can do, but it's really, really fancy. Okay. And so I'm going to show you what the model is. And I mean, we'll try to interpret it. Okay? So we can do it. It's just a little bit trickier. Okay? So if I use a ggplot and I'm going to tell it that the data is the sales, that's the one that I want, and X is the month and Y is the sales, and the factor is the quarter. Okay. And let me just make sure, does it have, I think it has that garbage Q1 that I added on. It does. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to re-import, sorry, just please stay on the line, because I want to make sure that it just has uh, 7 variables. So, and now it does. Okay, that's good. I just didn't know if it was going to mess it up, so I just didn't want to try it. Okay, so if I plot this, it has the plot, but I didn't say to plot anything. So now I'm going to ask it to give the plot, but also do the stat smooth, which is going to apply the line. And it's got all this other information here. And the method is linear model, full range equals false. I stole that from somewhere. I can't actually, I don't know off the top of my head what it means. What I would do is I would remove it to see what changes, and then that would give me a good idea. I'm just going to keep it there for now because I'm realizing I didn't play around with it. So now if I plot this, and if we zoom in here, if we break it up into quarters, right, each data point, the first 3 are in quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. Now we have these individual linear models depending, so one for each quarter, okay? We also see that there's a bit of a slope here, right? A positive slope, a positive slope, a negative slope, a positive slope, okay? And so the only way to get that across the months is if we incorporate a month variable. And so what happens here is, let me go here. The model that we're looking at here, this fancy model, has an interaction term, okay? And so what we're gonna have is we want the month in there because otherwise we don't see the changes across the months. Now, this previous model that we worked with, right, the sales against the quarter, those are just going to be straight lines, right? Y equals the intercept for Q1, for example, Y equals the intercept plus the Q2 coefficient for Q2, right? And so now we're stepping it up one notch by incorporating the month variable. Okay, making it a little bit fancier because we do see that there is some trend there. And if we go to the graphs, right, we see that these individual little piecewise models do a pretty good job of modeling the relationship in each quarter, right? So that's a good thing. This is a good model here. Okay. So what we do is we incorporate the month because that's the only way that we're going to have some slope, right? The slope changes for each month. Okay. We also have the quarter, and then this here is an interaction term. Okay, so we take the month times the quarter, and remember what the interaction term was? If we think that if there's some interaction between the month and the quarter, there should be, right? Because they're built off of each other, then we include the interaction term. Okay, so if we run this model, mod 4, and we look at the summary, all of a sudden we've got this awesome R squared, which we suspected because when we looked at it, it looked so promising, right? So we've got this amazing R squared. So this is what we're going for, right? 79.76% of the variability in Y is explained by this model. That's great. But interpretability is a little bit tricky. Okay, so we've got the intercept, and the intercept is going to be a placeholder. I'm just going to look at these quarters here. The intercept is still a placeholder for quarter 1. Okay, and then depending on the month, we have a slope for the month, and it looks like 7.5. And then if it's quarter 2, then the intercept drops down by, and this is scientific notation, so it's a little bit nasty to look at. And then if it's quarter 3, the intercept goes up to something from in quarter 1. And if the month, if it's Q1, then these all go to 0, right? Because then the month 1 is not in here. But if it's Q2, then you have the month times Q2, and the month has to be in Q2, but it'll contribute this much change, right? So that would be kind of the slope for each of those lines. Okay. Okay, I am pretty sure. Let me just check the time here. I am, just as I suspected, out of time. But so the hard part is interpreting these interaction terms, but it will give you the best model. So go as far as you are able to interpret the model. Okay, you don't want to hand something over that you don't know how to interpret. Okay. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a great weekend, and I will see you on Monday. I'll stop sharing here, and I'll stop recording actually.